I recently bought this 29-gallon Harbor Freight air compressor. In the future, I'll have a full video review about this and the positives and negatives of buying an air compressor from Harbor Freight. And believe me, there are negatives. This is my second one because the first one had a problem. But that's a discussion for another day. Today, I'll show you how to change the oil on this air compressor, and I'll show you why it's so important to flush out the oil on a new compressor after the initial break-in. These same steps will also apply to many other brands of air compressors. I have not used this air compressor very much. You might be able to see over here I have a whopping 0.3 hours on it. But I am going to change the oil, and that's because I want to flush out any debris from the manufacturing process or from the initial break-in. So what I'm going to do first is drain all the air out of the tank. Then I'll let it fill back up. That'll get the oil hot and flowing. I'll drain it out. And I'm going to do an initial change with the cheap stuff, the Harbor Freight oil. This oil is made in the USA, but I don't know who makes it. There's a stamp on the bottom of the bottle, MCO, but that's the company that made the bottle, not the company that made the oil. After that, I'm going to change it to some good stuff. This is fully synthetic air compressor oil. I paid 10 bucks for this at a local Menards store. The reason to use full synthetic, well, it is more expensive, unfortunately, but it flows better at low temperatures, so it'll be easier to start the compressor in low temperatures when it's cold out in the garage. Also, it probably offers a little bit better protection, although maybe not a huge difference, but just having synthetic oil in there helps me sleep at night. One thing I don't really love about this is how they have the pump set up when it comes to draining the oil. The drain plug is down here, and from what I've read online, it's hard to drain the oil without making a huge mess. So what I've done here is I put a board under two of the feet. That kind of tips the compressor this way a little bit. You don't want to go too far. You don't want to risk having it fall over. So what I'm going to do is pull out the plug here. I built this little ramp out of tin foil, and then I'm going to put a container down here. So hopefully this will let me drain the oil without making a huge mess. Unfortunately, my solution here is not working perfectly. It looks like most of the oil is going down the foil, but some of it is going back behind the pump and running down the tank and making a big mess. Now that I'm draining this, I also realize I should have removed the vent to help the oil drain, but I can't right now. I'm gonna pull the vent out here. Hopefully that'll help it drain. So far, my plan has been a pretty big failure, and I'm making a big mess here. All the oil is drained here, and we can see how my plan worked, and it worked pretty terribly. A lot of the oil did go down the ramp into the container like I was hoping it would. I think you can see this in the video. A good bit of oil also just ran down the side of the tank, and unfortunately made a big puddle on the floor. My initial plan here was to refill this with the Harbor Freight oil and then maybe change it in like a week or so. But since this made such a huge mess, I'm going to change my plan. I am going to do another quick flush with the Harbor Freight oil. I'll fill it up, let it run again, and drain it again. That way I'll just have one big mess to clean up instead of two smaller messes. And after I do that, I will refill it right now with the fully synthetic oil. I'm also going to take it off the blocks here and level it out before I fill it back up. I just got it filled back up here, and it used a little bit more oil than I was expecting. You can see it used a good portion of this bottle. I'll reinstall the breather here, drain the air out of the tank again, let it fill back up, then I'll drain the oil again. Time for round two. I'm about to drain the oil again. This time I got the tinfoil well behind the drain plug. Hopefully that'll keep oil from running back there and down the tank. It's been draining a couple minutes here. So far, so good. I don't see any oil running behind it. So it looks to me like one of the tricks is make sure the tin foil here is going well behind that drain plug. I have the drain plug reinstalled. Now I'm going to fill it up with the fully synthetic oil. In some ways, this was a pretty big failure. I made a huge mess, but I did learn some good lessons about changing the oil in this thing without making a huge mess, and hopefully some of you can learn from my mistakes. Even just pouring this fully synthetic oil in at room temperature, I can see that it flows significantly better than that conventional oil from Harbor Freight. This is the initial oil that I drained out of the air compressor. You can see that it is really dark and contaminated, so getting it out of there was a good idea. Hopefully you'll be able to see on the camera, there are definitely little shiny metal bits in here, those little particles from the initial break-in and the manufacturing. So it's a good thing that I changed this because you don't want those particles floating around in there, getting into the bearings and the piston rings and causing extra wear. I'm gonna dump most of the oil out of this. We'll see if there are any really big chunks that have settled to the bottom here. I'm having trouble finding a way to show this effectively on camera. I don't know if you'll be able to see it. There definitely are some larger pieces of debris down in here. Nothing huge and totally unexpected, but it does show that it was a really good idea to get this initial oil out of there. Anyway, guys, I hope this video was a little bit useful and maybe interesting to you. I'll have a full review on this air compressor coming up in the future. Thanks for watching.